And I'm going to look over my shoulder a couple times just to make sure it's still recording. But other than that, I think we're good to go. We're good.
Okay, Phil, the first thing I need from you, please, is how you would like your name to be rendered. Philip? Phil?
Phil.
Okay, no middle initial?
Well, my name is Philip A. Cool, 1 L. But everybody calls me Phil
Everybody
or
calls
Joe.
you Phil, that's right. And we need a birth date.
8/25/40.
Okay, you're just a little older than I am. How'd you do?
A young 78.
Yeah, you are young, 78. Were you born at home or in the hospital?
I was born in a hospital in Clinton, Iowa.
And the family is from Clinton originally.
The family I grew up in, I'm the oldest of 7 children. I have 6 sisters. My father and my mom moved to this little town called Miles, Iowa, which is population 355. They always used to say it pays to travel miles to miles. But so I was a kind of a pre-World War II baby, and I had my father ended up volunteering during World War II after Pearl Harbor, went into the Navy. And so my mom, I had a sister at that time, 2 years 2 years younger than I am, and my mother was also pregnant with a third child. And so I entered first grade at Miles Consolidated School when I was 4, which meant I graduated from high school when I was 16.
And how did your family get to Clinton?
Oh, I think my father was an only child and the only son of actually my grandparents were divorced or separated. My grandfather, Cool, actually in that area they called it Kiel, so K-U-H-L is pronounced Kiel, which more is a phonetic pronunciation of K-U-H-L in German. So I really didn't know my grandfather. I only knew my mother. And so my mother's genealogy goes way, way back. I mean, she's got a lot written on her genealogy, but my father, I don't really know as much about my father's genealogy as I wish I should, or should have, probably.
Well, you said that they came from Germany originally, yes? Or you thought
They
did?
came, my father did, not my mother.
Okay.
My mother is Swiss-Irish, that in general terms she would say, and English actually. Some of her relatives, or my relatives on my mother's side, actually were some of the original settlers in this country, actually. They've gone the genealogy back to that.
1700s?
Oh, yeah. So now somebody's developed that. I actually have a copy of it, but I have not. Again, I'm not that oriented toward genealogy.
Understood. But your father's family was more, or your father was a more recent arrival, or his family was more recent.
My grandfather
Grandfather.
actually was, I think, born in the United States.
Okay.
My great-grandfather came from Germany, I think from northern Germany.
Do you know why he came?
I don't know that.
Okay, just entry to the New World mostly.
No.
Really. Okay. All right.
I think he was part of that mass exodus of people leaving Germany, probably because of economic reasons, or maybe they were hungry.
And there was substantial, at that time, your great-grandfather would have been substantial turmoil. There were a number of European wars taking place, so that might have been part of it. And then you grew up in Miles.
I did.
And take us through a little bit how you wound up starting your career and getting
in Morton, Illinois. Oh, I could talk for a while about that. So I got out of high school when I was 16. I went to college in Dubuque and Loras College, and that did not go well. I was there about a year and a half and basically flunked out. Well, I was also out of money because by then my mom and dad had another 3-4 kids, and the house I grew up in only had really it had 3 bedrooms in it, and basically they ran out of rooms for people. We only had 1 bathroom, that's interesting, living in a house with 6 girls. But anyway, so at 16, basically I left home. I went to college. After that, I spent 3-4 years. Oh, gee whiz. I went to college. His first summer, I went to Oregon and worked for the Forest Service. Basically lied about my age because you had to be 18 and I was only 17. Spent 3 summers, I spent 3 summers in Oregon working for the Forest Service, missed some college and missed a lot of jobs. I ended up really finally getting my feet on the ground. I was 21. I had fallen in love with my wife of now 56 years, Barbara, and I got a job with Penny's in Clinton, Iowa. And little interesting side story is that the penny manager there basically kind of took me under his
tutelage.
Yeah. My life, I mean, I was never a bad person. I didn't get into any, I wasn't led astray, except that the fact is I basically was on my own from the time I was 16. And the penny manager said, "Hey, you would be really good in Penny's management, but you're going to have to go back to school." And so that got me back to Loras. And they paved the way for me to work back at the Penny store in Dubuque. I got my job, finished school, went into Penny's management training program, got transferred to Rockford. And one day, and Rockford, my neighbor who was a claim adjuster, said, "Hey, Phil, they're looking for a sales rep for the company I work for." It was called Employers of Wausau. And I said, "Bill, no thanks. I'm not going to be an insurance salesman. I'm doing really good with my career path." And well, he said, "If you'll just take the interview," he said, "I will get some stamps," like they called them topo points. You remember they fill up books with
Yes.
value stamps. And we could get a swing set in this neighborhood that we were living in for our 2 little girls, and we didn't have a swing set there. So I took the interview with the hope of we could get a swing set. That job interview turned into me moving to Morton. I was 27, I think, at the time. And when we got here, we were basically broke. We had 2 children, and but that's how I got to Morton on a sham, trying to get a swing set with my neighbor, and I thank God for that incredible stroke of good fortune, because it was the best thing that ever happened.
You came here, I think, as an employee of another company, and then you decided to start your own.
Yeah, that is also, I spent 7 years with that company, working primarily on commercial insurance risks. And Then I left that company 7 years later, and basically, I would say started on my own. And but it really wasn't until February 5th, 1979, that I started Cool Insurance. And that happened. The agency that I had a relationship with in Decatur as an independent contractor decided that he was going to sell his agency and he needed to get rid of people like me. So I came to my office the morning of February 5th, 1979, and my key didn't work in my office door that he was providing me. And that's how I learned that our contract had been terminated. And so, what do we do? And talked to my wife and said, well, perhaps we could start our own business. And that's what we did. Rented a bunch of office equipment and found a secretary, rented a copy machine. I went out and I got all old furniture because I couldn't afford new. And my slogan was, good old-fashioned service.
And it was.
And it was. And it still is, I'd like to think. So that was, I think today our company is going to be, we started in 79, so we're almost 40 years old, 39 years old. So we have, 28, 29 employees, and have been it's been a very cool, to coin a phrase,
no pun intended,
story.
Experience, yes.
So that was my business background.
What was your first impression of Morton when you came here?
Well, actually, Highway 74 had just been finished. So Morton was about probably, maybe 6,000, 7,000 people, I would guess. And my office was in Peoria. So I just needed a place to live. We rented a duplex up on 4th and Edgewood. And so it was just a place to live. Looked like it had good school, and the church was good, and it was, but initially it was just a place to live. But within a week, a dynamic thing happened that changed my opinion of Morton almost initially. Is the fluorescent bulb above my kitchen sink didn't work. Okay, so I needed to go get a new bulb, and I went down to the hardware store downtown. I think it was called Roker's Hardware. And if I'm not mistaken, the guy running this store, his name was Glenn. I didn't know that. But I bought a bulb, and I wrote a check for it. My checkbook was still from Rockford Bank. I got the bulb back home, and it was the wrong size. So I came back into the store, and this guy called me by my first name. He said, "Hey, Phil, can I help you?" And I thought, wow, now that was pretty impressive. But you know what? The town has been like that forever. It's just, this is the most embracing community I'm so lucky.
One of the questions I have asked, this is a slight diversion, but it's appropriate since you mentioned it, is what accounts for that feeling that nearly all of us have about Morton? It is something intrinsically good and satisfying about Morton, and you just made that same observation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you could probably maybe even write a lot about it, and if I thought very much about it, I could probably enhance it too much. But the one thing that happened when we came to Morton, you have to remember, it was during the time 74 had just opened up. The economy was really bubbling around here. There were a lot of people moving to town, and the town was going through a growth spurt. the schools, the downtown, and it was going through a growth spurt. And the community had a newcomers club that was very active. And we joined the newcomers club because we wanted to meet people. And also, our church was growing too. We're a Roman Catholic, and we were going to the Catholic Church, and that was kind of new, so that was kind of growing. And so there's a natural, I think, outreaching of people that was there. But as you're here for a little while, you really realize that there is an almost, I think it's God-given. I think we're a graced community. There's like there's something special about this town. Actually, one of the reasons I like the Pumpkin Festival so much is because at the Pumpkin Festival, you get to see it firsthand, you know? I mean, it's a time when all of the churches, the businesses, people, they come to the pumpkin. They work together, and it's like there's no. It's great. I think the Pumpkin Festival has had a lot to do with maintaining the quality of our town. Now, that's my perception, but I think it's kept businesses together. I think it keeps people together. It's these various Christian, wonderful Christian churches, communities here. Their traditions are strong, but our values are all the same, and all of those get to come together. I get goosebumps talking about it because it's a wonderful place. You know it's wonderful because people that have lived here during that time, a lot of those people we met initially, they were here and then they left, and they were here and they left. You know what? They're still our friends. They still come back a lot of times for the Pumpkin Festival, and they wish they lived here, So.
Who were some of the community leaders that you remember during this period when you were getting integrated with the town, and particularly the newcomer? I remember the Newcomers Club, but I think by the time we got here in 1977, it had kind of fizzled out because I don't think anybody ever contacted us. But.
Well, there's a little interesting thing I'd like to stick in here because maybe one of the best lessons that I ever got was in Rockford. I was in this downtown business community, and perhaps it's too long a story to tell, but one day I was assistant manager of the penny store there, and all of the downtown business people, all men, no women, we got together for lunch in the basement of this men's haberdashery, and Fred, the owner, would fix a great lunch. Well, most of these guys they ran the Bergner store, or they ran the jeweler, or this guy, or all of those, and they sat around this large table, and that was just what we did every day for lunch. Well, in my home life, I lived on a duplex way on the north side of town. I didn't know anybody. We weren't active in our church. And our neighbors on the other side of the duplex, Roger and Judy, would always say, "Rockford, I hate Rockford. It's cliquish. They got the Italians and the Swedes, and they're always telling jokes on, we hate this town." And they would go on, expand that. So it's 2.5 years later, I'm back at the smoke shop, sitting around the table with people. And the jeweler, who happened to be Jewish, sitting here to my left, I can still hear his voice. "Well, Phil, how long have you lived now in Rockford?" I said, "I lived here about 2.5 years. "Well, Phil, how do you like Rockford?" And I said, "Well, I said I come from a real small town, but I said Rockford seems a little cliquish. It seems like," and he raised his voice and he says, "What? Cliquish?" And then he pointed at me and he said something, I can hear his voice yet today. He says, "What? You think Phil Cool comes to Rockford? You think Rockford should roll out the red carpet for Phil Cool? What have you done for Rockford? What have you done for Rockford?" I can hear it. And he was right. He was right. And I think when I got to Morton, I said, I'm not ever going to be challenged like that again. And besides, I was in the insurance business and wanted to meet people, so I don't think I was here, I bet I wasn't here 3 months, and I ended up getting involved in a Kiwanis club that was getting started, and I wanted to be involved in the chamber. The chamber was really in its earliest days then, but there was an organization, and I think my first years to be an associate, it was $35. And my company wouldn't pay for it, but I paid for it because I was not going to be challenged again. So I got involved in the chamber immediately. And what that meant, I got involved in the early pumpkin festivals, and I served actually on their executive committee for, 3 years, I think. I was around when they started the what's the new business, the ambassadors. Who are the people, you ask? Downtown business people basically were the core group, Glenn Barger was another, he was one of the early presidents, if not the first president of the chamber when it got reorganized. Bob Murphy was an insurance guy downtown, was the guy that ran the first pumpkin festivals, basically, or community festivals. The Witzigs have been just horses through my whole time here. They were, Gene and Harold they were everything. Gwen Phillips ran a realtor
Yes.
here, really a great lady, way ahead of her time, because there weren't a whole lot of, at that time, there weren't a whole lot of women that were involved in that. It was always men, and Gwen was just a real culture changer person and a great lady. So those were, the city, I think the earliest mayor that I remember was, Heiniger, Al Heiniger. And, but the city and the chamber never were very close to each other. I think it was like they kept a little bit distant, more distant, certainly than they are today. So I'm rambling a little bit.
No,
but
you're doing fine. Tell me again what year it is that you got here.
I got here in what would it be? I've been here 50 years, so it must have been in, is that 68? 1968.
About 10 years before I did.
Yeah. During Halloween that month, this time of year. So.
What are the most significant changes, do you think, since that time?
Oh, wow. Oh, obviously the town's gotten larger. I think things have gotten better. Our schools are just, I think, second to none. I think the community has certainly continued its very strong Christian-based tradition, and I see that still as being real strong. I-74, the railroads, back then, the rail industry was a pretty good, still an asset to our area. But it was, it's interesting how that has changed, where that has, kind of evaporated. But she was, I just see the town as being better. I think it's, at least it's certainly matured nicely since, I would say. So.
The relationship, you mentioned the relationship between the village and the business community. And if I can editorialize for a moment, that was, my understanding, to some extent deliberate. And when I first became a trustee in Norm Derflinger's administration, there was a sense, I think, among a lot of people that needed to change. And there was a conscious effort to do that. And then, of course, we founded the Economic Development Council. Would you characterize that as did we change it, and how effective do you think that's been?
Well, there's no doubt that Norm, when he became, the relationship between the chamber and the village government did change. But if I could just go back just for a second and drop way back when I first got here, Al Heiniger, he was a very influential mayor.
Yes.
I mean, he was the guy that gathered together what the town that it was. And I think he was but he was a businessman, and so he really did have, he understood. And I think he understood what the new interstate was going to do, or what it could be. And Gene Mathis, who I think followed him, was a businessman. Chalmer Arnett was with the bank, and he was a businessman.
Yes.
Yeah. But then I think Doc Hertenstein got involved, in a very smart guy, a surgeon. But suddenly there was, I think, walls started to get built between the business community and the village. That would just be my sense. And I was not a trustee, so I don't really know that. I'm just talking about how it felt. But in the early days, in the early 80s, when the economy really went in the tank here, the chamber was really, we needed to try to get some traction. We needed to get some business going here. And I know that we had meetings. Actually, I think we technically formed the Economic Development Council then, and I think Norm was on that group, and I can't remember the faces around that table, but we started meeting and trying to find businesses or introduce businesses. We were trying to get CAT to go after their subcontractors or suppliers to maybe bring people here. As an insurance guy, I was talking to insurance companies, seeing if they would maybe open up a claim office here. We were looking for smokeless industries and trying to bring things here. But it was, all of that was going on during that Hertenstein period, and you can't do economic development without the village working as a team. I mean, they're separate, but they have to work together, and we weren't. And so Economic Development Committee and Chamber struggled, I think, during those years, from my perspective, and the city did very well. Hertenstein did a great job of running the city, and they, it was financially, fiscally responsible. Boy, they put together a great plan to take care of infrastructure, and but we weren't working together. And Norm, when Norm got to be mayor, that whole thing changed. I mean, Norm understood real well, because he had served before in that effort of trying to develop, be sensitive to economic development. There was, way back after they opened Detroit Street, one of my first, this is backing up a little bit, but not long after I moved here, I don't know when Detroit Street opened, but it was probably 70, 72, 71, 69, 70, someplace in there. They opened up Detroit Street, and there was a great big EDC day, actually, back as early as that. And guy from CAT, his name was Barlow, and I think Gene Mathis was mayor, along with and of course Al was still living then. But they had a great big EDC blitz. It lasted like for 2 days. And we brought in mostly Caterpillar suppliers, but we gave them a bus trip and had speakers. We had all of the officials made presentations. We had a big book that we put together, and I don't know if that book is still around, but it was well done, and it was really a pretty cool effort. But anyway, I think since the last 10, 15 years, I think the relationship between the chamber and village and EDC and all of that, it seems to me that things are really going in the right direction.
Mayor Hertenstein is the one who appointed me to the Plan Commission in about 1980.
Mm-hmm.
My sense has been over the years that there were some significant infrastructure issues, and I think there was a feeling in the village at the time that needed to be their focus. So I think I don't know that there was a strong intentional distance between the municipal administration and the business community, but I think there was a feeling that there were just some things that had to be done, and those things had to come first, and that the private enterprise needed to simply act as private enterprise. And then as those problems got resolved in some of the infrastructure repairs that needed to be done, and the revenue and budget issues got resolved, then I think there was a sense that we can turn maybe broaden our outlook a little bit, and Norm under Norm's administration, of course, that became more of a goal. I worked with Norm on that. But, you remember any of the other personalities from that era? The town just seemed to be full of so many people some of the old-timey families who were prominent farmers. And,
sure. Obviously Jim Yorty.
Yep.
And Bud Zobrist, I think, was on the board for a while, and Bill Roker served for a little bit. He was a contractor in town. And I really don't, I can't really say that I was, I'm not necessarily a political person, and probably sometimes too, maybe I don't mean this as a compliment or bragging, but maybe too visionary sometimes. I'll remember one thing that would be interesting maybe for this is the bike trail project, for example. And that became a failure under Hertenstein and that board. They rejected it. The project actually started under Gene Mathis as mayor, and there was a grant available to study bike safety, pedestrian bike safety. And the mayor thought that would be really a good deal, right? And so he ended up hiring a consultant, but he needed local people to do a bunch of work. And I became the co-chairman of that effort. And it lasted 2 years to put that study together. And it was an incredible piece of work. I mean, we involved thousands of hours of volunteers. We had pedestrian counts, and we hosted a couple of bike races, and we did a lot of communication stuff, and we just did a lot of work. And what emerged was a very, very complete study of a future of bike trails in Morton. And actually some of that actually got put in place. If you go out to Northwoods Park, they redid that railway that just before you get to the park, and if you look to the west, there's a little strip of sidewalk in there. They had to put in a culvert, and they've made it wide enough to facilitate the bike path. And but that's the only thing. The other thing is when CAT was going to expand their parts department on the north side of the interstate, when all of that water line and sewer line and everything was going to get put in to take care of all of that, that whole project was supposed to get finished out with a separated bike path that was going to go all the way out to Northwoods. It would go under the interstate. It was made wide enough, North Main Street. If you go under there, it's really wide there to facilitate that bike trail. Is going to go all the way out and go to Northwoods. And those were a couple of things. And of course, the railroad right-of-way, that railroad right-of-way was getting abandoned. That ran right straight through town. Right. And that's still one of the worst things I think that the city ever did, was not to grab onto that. Because today, with what's happened to bike safety, pedestrian safety, and everything else, imagine what our town would be if that railroad right-of-way that went straight through town all the way to East Peoria was today a pedestrian way and bike way. That would be phenomenal. It would be absolutely phenomenal. And our wonderful village board could not see that, nor would could the park district see it. And that whole thing basically got trashed. And what was worse than that is they started erasing some of it from the long-range plan. You know, the city paid for it. It was done really well, and it got erased. And I'm not going to say I'm bitter about that, but we worked really hard on that project. So today, as we're sitting here looking at bikes all over every place, and everybody wants to be, we could have been the mecca of recreational biking.
Have
that gone through?
Long-term plan?
It was before that.
Okay.
This goes back. Gene Mathis was mayor.
Okay.
So
well, that one didn't work out so well, but you had two other big successes. One was the Community Foundation. I believe you were instrumental in getting that done, and the other is the Fine Arts Association. So
yeah.
How about discussion of those two
projects?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the Morton Community Foundation is, I think, first of all, okay. But that, I think, is the most important project that I've ever been involved in for our community, in not just short run, but in the long run. I think in the long run, it's going to be something really very, very, very significant. But the way it started, I really didn't even know what a foundation was until I was talking to actually an insurance guy from Quincy, and they had started a community foundation down there that somehow, in my particular mind, turned into basically a foundation is like a money machine, as it were. You put tax-deductible dollars into it, you can't spend it, but every year you take money off of it in terms of the earnings, and that looks pretty good. Morton's got all kinds of wealth, and imagine the tax liability that sits on all of the people in Morton between their estate tax and the taxes. It is huge, the amount of dollars that is here. Well, the Community Foundation I saw as a way to begin to tap into that. And so there were, I got 4 other people together, Gene Peterson, Dennis Ewald, John
Myers?
No, CPA, John Souter. John Souter. And we met in my office, and Dennis had served on the board of the Peoria Area Community Foundation at the time, and we talked about setting up a community foundation here. I was really surprised to learn that there really are, at that time, there's only about 400 community foundations in the United States. So it wasn't, it's not like something everybody was doing, but it sure sounded like a good idea. And they all agreed with that. And so we spent the next year, we actually first started meeting in 1999. And by 2000, we had the paperwork put together. We put together a relationship with the Peoria Area Community Foundation to basically do the paperwork, the heavy work of us. And then what we did, we put together a very distinguished board of directors, and we began to try to sell this concept of community foundation. A very influential part of that is Indiana is really good at community foundations, and partially because of Eli Lilly, who will give you money to get them started, basically. So I made contact with a community foundation in Warsaw, Indiana, and the director of that her name was Susie Light, and I got her to come over and talk to our board and talk about their story and what they do and how to make it work and all of that. And we're all just doing this basically on our own time and not doing probably that effective a job, but we did get it started. And but her influence, or at least she gave us, hey, this is what you can be. We stumbled around with the community foundation from like 2000. I don't know when Scott Witzig, we hired him to come on board. Maybe 6 years later, 5 years later, something like that. Because we recognized that to get this going, really, you need someone that's really running the show. But that costs money to do that. So we put together some money to try to hire somebody to do that, and that's when we hired Scott as our first exec. And it's growing. It's not growing fast enough as far as I'm concerned, but it's growing, and it's gonna be a very impactful thing. The more people understand it, the more they understand the benefit of it, the more. You know what I like best about it is that in Illinois, we have the misfortune of living in a state right now that's broke. And we all pay all kinds of taxes, and we get less and less and less back because we're an affluent community that's always run our community well, debt-free and all of that other stuff. And so we don't get back what we really should. The community foundation is a pathway to get around that, because you put money into the community foundation, I can say, hey, I want the money to go to the park district, or I want the money to go to the school, or I want it to go to the music program here, or whatever the case might be. And it's a great way to redirect my tax liability to make sure that it comes back into our community and things that are going to make us better. That place, that's a good place to live for forever, in the long run, and it's going to grow. So I'm very excited and proud of the community foundation, and that's going to be good. It's going to be good. It isn't even close to as good as it can get.
The other thing that we did not have when I came here was a fine arts association. And a fellow I know who plays the banjo became deeply involved in that, I believe, and a principal in the development of that organization as well.
So the Fine Arts Association started in really kind of by accident. Ed Kaiser, who's a great pianist and head of that department in Bradley.
Right.
Ed has been a longtime friend, and he called me up in I think it was in April, and said, this would have been, I'm trying to think of the year. So Morton Fine Arts Association right now is 11 years old this year. So it would have been 11 years ago. He called up and he said, hey, I've got this group coming in from Denmark. It's a Dixieland group. And he said, Bradley are coming over Bradley's invited them, but they need some places to play. Do you have anything over in Morton? Well, we had the Birth of Frank, And I said, well, we got the Bertha Frank. Well, he said, do you think you could put together a concert there? And so, yeah, I think we could do that. So we ended up setting a date with the Bertha Frank, and we sold tickets to a concert. And the concert was going to be, I think it was in June. It wasn't very long. We sold the tickets for, I think, $10-15 a piece. A local business person, and I think I can mention his name. I talked about the idea to Henry Getz at Morton Buildings. Said, Henry, I can bring this Dixieland band, and it's only $1,000. He said, I like that. And he wrote me a check for $1,000. So we got the band paid for. We sold tickets for $10-15 a piece. We filled the Bertha Frank up. And I don't know, we walked away with about $15,000 of profit. Well, we're not any kind of an organization, but the gentleman who was managing the Bertha Frank at that time, he says, you know, we ought to be doing this all the time because the people loved it. They loved it. And so literally by the time the Pumpkin Festival started, we ended up hiring 5 or 4 bands to put forth what was called a fall-winter performing arts series. Well, in order to do that, we had to have some kind of an organization. So we thought, well, we'll incorporate. So we created the not-for-profit organization, did all of this in that short period of time, thanks to Ray Mason. And we put together our corporate papers, got that approved, put together a board of directors. I got some great people on the board. And we had a fall-winter performing arts series 11 years ago this year. 4 shows, ticket was $50. We raised about $8,000 for underwriting from sponsors, people like our company and the bank, and I went out and scraped together that money to give us a little bit of capital to get the thing going. Well, gee whiz, the fall-winter series went okay, enough that we had $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 left over, and so we thought, well, let's do a series in the park for the summer because we could get bands real cheap for that. So we thought, well, where are we going to do this? There's an old fountain out there that has long since gone, and we built a wooden platform out of 2x8s and some plywood on top of it, and a couple of light poles that we put together from Farm and Fleet, and we had a stage to do these summer concert series. So we ran the 6-7 summer concert series, and man, that went really, really good. So then we've repeated that every year since then. The problem is our stage wasn't big enough in the park. We had to expand it twice, I think, and we needed a venue for that. And so, you know, one of the nicest parts about the Fine Arts Association, outside of its current sellout, we just had a concert Monday night there wasn't a seat in it. I mean, it was awesome, and people loved the heck out of it. But that money that we made off that first concert, we put that money in the community foundation and set up a fine arts endowment. And that $15,000, I think now is like $30,000. And every year we're buying something, violins for the band or the orchestra, or we're doing something because the grant's off of that. And that little endowment is going to grow and grow and grow. The second really neat thing that happened is we needed a new venue in the park. And actually, something I kid growing up in this little town, we had in the center of this town there was a pavilion, little bitty wood pavilion, like you'd put a little band on it. But every Wednesday as kids, we would go down to the park. There were swings, and I remember one of my earliest memories was going to the park. My dad had a grocery store, and they would show movies in the park or whatever, but it was the place where people went, and I still remember that. And so I told my wife, I said, you know what, I'd really like to get involved in putting together something here in town. So we had to get rid of some money, and so we ended up putting a pretty good chunk of change down to basically get an architect and come up with some plans. We got permission from the Park District, and pretty quick we had a plan for the Idlewood Arts Pavilion. And it wouldn't have happened were our contractor. I wanted to make sure that the thing was built by all local people. I didn't want it to go out. If I give the money to the Park District to do it, well, they got all their bidding rules. They got to get everybody bidding on it. We said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll build it, and then we'll just give it to the Park District. Would you take it if we gave it to you? So what we did is we bid it, we built it, and we gave it to the Park District. Core Construction was our general contractor on it, who gave us a really good deal. So did Opperly Construction. So did Kaiser Electric. And but we got a $750,000 pavilion built for $500,000. Core gave us 3 years to pay them. We got it paid off in 2 years. Gave it to the Park District. It'll be there for a long time. Pretty cool. So the little Fine Arts Association, I think made Morton a better place really for its people, not just all old people, but young people too, in the school, and the pavilion will be used for a long time. For it's well done, in a great place, and so. So lest I said it was I that did it. I didn't do that, but I did have the blessing of being a part of it.
So what do you think's next? When you look down the road at Morton, where do we go from here? What should things look like? Well, the conversation I was having earlier today with Ruthie, I think there are things that we could use. I wish we had a convention center like they had in Washington, 5 Points, that had a place where, number one, where we could feed 600 to 1,000 people. So some kind of a large area and facilities where you could feed 1,000 people. And that had, now we've got the Bertha Frank now, and it's a wonderful place. But we really should have something that seats like 1,200, at least. And it would be wonderful if we had a museum, a place where people like Ruthie and Don Roth or Verdon Rinkenberger had a lot of things, the pottery collection. There's all kinds. Morton's getting to be a mature community, and we need a place where we can begin to put some people that just want to, give that away. Now, is it going to be a big popular place? Not right now, it's not, but it's long run, it's going to be something that's needed. This facility could also be a place where there would be smaller community rooms where our aging population here could meet for. Maybe they're going to have a knitting class, or they're going to have a writing a book class, or they could have these little, a place that people could go, and it's there. We've got a wonderful library. We don't need a separate library right now. It would be nice if we had an indoor swimming pool. And if we had a significant swimming facility, maybe even attached to that the school district could get involved in that, or the Park District. And a great place for this would actually be
at the corner of Detroit Street and Birchwood, all that land that goes between Birchwood and the highway. There's a big space in there. It would make a great front door to Morton if that was something like that was in here. So that won't happen.
Is there anything that I should have asked you about that I did not? Anything that you think is important or that we've missed or commentary on Morton?
I love our community, and I'm absolutely incredibly passionate about it. And there is a cloud that hangs over me today because of the condition of the state of Illinois. And I am sad to see a lot of my friends becoming residents of Florida and taking their estates out of here. And I am sad when I have a granddaughter that just graduated college that is not going to teach in Illinois because of Illinois and its condition. She's going to choose to teach in Iowa. And I've got 4 grandsons right now that I would love to have involved in our business. But our business is dependent upon a good business economy. And it troubles me, the condition of our state, and I don't see them getting out of that box very quick. And so right now, that's the cloud that hangs over my head, and I don't see that storm passing real quick. And that hurts me, frankly, a lot, because if we were in Indiana right now with this town, or we were in Iowa, or all of our neighboring states are doing really, really good right now. But gee whiz, we're just, it's such an incredible place to live. I'm very blessed. I am beyond words to have been fortunate enough to move to Morton 50 years ago. And my Jewish jeweler friend had said, don't wait for someone to roll out the red carpet. There's everything that I have done, I get back 10 times more than anything that I ever gave away. And we're in a town where that seems to happen. I'm thankful for our schools, and I'm thankful for the people that are here, and thankful for our churches. And if I had my life to live all over again, I would be really lucky to find this place again.
We are thankful for you.
So.
And with that, I will say thank you for the interview.
Yeah. So the next one, I'll bring my banjo in.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be fabulous.
Always enjoyed your banjo.
Yeah. Very
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Before I forgot, you said the grandson going to U of I. Is that Mike's son?
Yep.
Now, isn't that interesting? You know, Mike and my older daughter were classmates.
Sure.
Both of them sending their son to U of I for the first time this fall.
What is she studying? Do you know? What's she going to study?
My grandson?
Yeah.
He's admitted to the School of Business there.
That's a tough big school to get into.
Yes, he did very well. But
my grandson is going to be in the. He's the golfer.
Yes.
I mean, he probably wouldn't be going to. He wouldn't be going to Illinois if it weren't for his ability to play golf, and but he is very talented, and his career path is laid ahead of him. He knows and loves what he's doing. He may not make the tour, but he will be in the golf industry, and he knows that.
Talented young man.
And to some extent, he's already got his degree. what he's doing now is he's getting his credentials, and he's going to one of the top-ranked golf schools in the country.
Yeah.
So he's very, very fortunate. But his older brother goes to University of Wisconsin, Pete,
Ah,
and he's studying business there.
grandson almost went there. That was one of his picks.
And he's doing good. He's a junior. I got another grandson that's going to the University of Dayton. Carrie's our
I know
daughter's
that place.
son.
I know that place well.
Yeah. So, anyways,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm not sure what the interview was, but it's highlights of my existence here.
Phil and I go back a ways, and you know, we moved. I came a little after he did, but I got involved in things in Morton, and when we got a chance to finally to really start making some changes in the way things got done, we had a handful of people that were really willing to pitch in and had visions, and that's how we got the Economic Development Council formed, and there were just so many people, Brad Breaker and Mike Witzig and all the people who were originally on, I can't think of everybody right now, but the board, the people that supported it behind the scenes, Honegers, and you know, Phil, and we had some folks, we had to, you know, I recall the park board used to say no to everything, and we had to slay some dragons, but we made progress.
There was a, I forget what it was, but I think the chamber hosted that too. There was a group that got put together, like 8 or 10 of us, and it was, I'm trying to think who moderated that or who was the consultant, but the intention was to come up with a vision of what, maybe it was after Norm got to be mayor.
That was Glenn, God, what was the last name? The guy we hired from the consulting firm. That was the precursor, and that's where I got involved. And
Was it the downtown development plan?
this was before downtown development. This was before we actually founded the Economic Development Council. It was the
Okay.
sort of the precursor group.
Sure.
And I got involved in it, and I've still got the guy's name at home, and I worked with him quite a bit. Then he left when he finished the consulting job and took another job, went someplace else, another job. But I stayed in touch with him for a long time, and he made a statement. Now, this was a guy that went all over the United States and did this kind of consulting on community development and forming economic development councils and finding people like Jennifer Daly and all the kinds of things that we did. And before he left, I took him to lunch. We were sitting there, we were talking a little bit about his experience here, and he said, you know, you could run the world from Morton. He had so much respect for the talent. We've had so much depth of talent in, you know, Craig Barley and you know, the talent that Scott Witzig brought to the Community Foundation, and just a long list of people, and a number of people that I served with on the Plan Commission and on the village board who really wanted to make a difference and put more into the job than was required, you know, and participated, and it really has made a difference in the community. Without that having happened, we would just look sort of like we did back when and not really have made any progress. Probably had been in trouble. We took a lot of heat during those years from the people who didn't think we ought to do this. And I used to have arguments with people, so, you know, you don't understand. If we lose business investment in the community, that's a guaranteed way for your property taxes to go up. Those successful businesses, most of whom are your friends and neighbors, are the bulk of the revenue. And it was a pretty significant battle, and it played a big role in the mayor's campaign, which I lost because partly for that reason. But people were opposed to the plaza, and so it took a long time to sort of change. And it was not a very large group, but they were so vociferous and so venomous in their opposition. It took a lot of work, and for what what Phil did with the Fine Arts Association, the community development, the other people that were associated with that. That was a big step, and we've been lucky that we've had people that were willing to put the time and effort and personal money. We've had folks that have written some big checks, a lot of money in Morton, and people that were willing to say, "Hey, I'll put my money where my mouth is, and we're going to do that."
Oh, we could have done a lot more. I wish I had done more. I have to tell you about that group that got together, that study group. One of our first assignments, and this would give you a hint as to the affliction that is on that I have. So they ask you some questions. So what do you think about this? What's in 5 years or 10 years or 25 years? Or what do you think about this? And we were given this assignment to go.
Back in the 60s.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was that.
I want to see this study.
So they asked. I went home, and I was going to answer this questionnaire. So I said, "Well, so what are we going to look like? What are things that could really impact our community?" And I started writing about that, and writing about this, and writing about that. And I went to the next meeting, and I'm telling you, I think what I turned in, I'll bet I had 3 or 4 pages of my vision of what Morton would be or could be if we did it. Everybody else came back to the meeting with 1 page, and they just had a paragraph here, and a paragraph here, and a paragraph here, and I thought, see,
You sure this wasn't the 79 point?
It was a 79.
I was involved in that.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that. And I thought it was wonderful because I was on the plan commission. I thought, finally, we're going to, and I don't remember who that group was, but.
Well, if you remember my report that I did, nobody laughed about it, but what I thought we should do is I thought we should really work hard toward developing an airport.
I remember that.
In Lincoln.
Yes, I remember that.
And where we'd bring together Springfield, Decatur, Peoria, Bloomington, and all these places that got all these little airports that are struggling for carriers, and we needed to get somebody that would be even considered maybe even being a hub to Central Illinois. O'Hare has got problems up there. There's too much air traffic. If they could get something downstate that really is still close enough.
We had
and
a
you got
deficit.
CAT.
Peoria was not a good.
Right. And if that could have ever happened, I'll tell you what, that would change Morton indelibly forever, because CAT would definitely not be moving to Chicago right now, number one. We'd have a lot more large companies that would have moved here, number two, because of the quality of life. Morton would have expanded. We'd be stretched all the way down to Tremont at this point, is because that there would be a corridor of development that would go on all the way down to this airport in Lincoln.
We worked on it. We're that corridor still has potential, but no airport.
All right.
I want to see that bike plan, though. Do you still have it?
I had a box of stuff. The study, I gave a box of stuff. It was that deep. And I'm sure there's some sitting around, but I don't have it.
You don't have it?
I gave it. I got it out of my.
I think I took your water. I think that one's
If you think of it, shoot me an email with a Monday, Wednesday, Friday choice for Harriet.
Let me write that down real quick so I don't forget.
And we'll get in and do her, because she's...
Yeah, it'd be great to capture Monday. Phil, thank you again. Appreciate it.
I hope that's what you were looking for, kind of.
Oh,
100%.
that's exactly what
We would, I also wanted just to remind you too that we do still hope to catch you a night for a mixer in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, we could probably still do one in November or December if we wanted to, but I think if we could plan it out, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, we are leaving next week and back about a week around Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Just a little bit at Christmas, but
We book it online.
Sure.
Do you think you'll be able to?
Oh, mine.